Hello. On behalf of Yad Vashem and the American Society for Yad Vashem, welcome to this segment of Lessons from Our Parents, where we will have the opportunity to be inspired by the life lessons transmitted by the extraordinary survivors of the Holocaust to their very accomplished children, members of the second generation. My name is Lawrence Burian, and I myself am a son of a Holocaust survivor. It is my privilege to be joined today by Mr. Daniel Lubetzky. Hi, Daniel.
Hi, Lawrence.
Daniel Lubetzky is a business leader, investor, and social entrepreneur working to build bridges between people and increase appreciation for our shared humanity. While best known as the founder of Kind Snacks, Daniel's foray into food was the unexpected outcome of his work to use business to bring neighbors in Middle Eastern conflict regions together. Daniel is passionate about channeling business forces to achieve social good. With the introduction of Kind's first fruit and nut bars in 2004, Daniel created a new healthy snacking category. He has since built Kind into one of America's fastest growing and most trusted snack companies. The now multi-billion-dollar brand is committed to creating a kinder and healthier world, one act and one snack at a time. The son of a Holocaust survivor, Daniel conceived of a number of nonprofits to foster empathy and encourage civil action. And through his family office, Daniel is committed to helping fellow entrepreneurs build their visions into thriving brands. In 2019, Daniel was appointed to the Anti-Defamation League's inaugural board of directors. In 2015, Daniel was named a presidential ambassador for global entrepreneurship by President Obama. He is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Do the Kind Thing, and a recurring shark on ABC's television series Shark Tank. Daniel holds a BA in Economics and International Relations from Trinity University and a JD from Stanford Law School. He is a proud U.S. citizen, having emigrated from Mexico at the age of 16. Daniel is married and the proud father of 4 children. Daniel, it would be wonderful if you could share with us some more context around your father's story. I know, for example, that he was born in Riga, survived the ghetto in Slobodka, and later the Dachau concentration camp. But if you can share with our viewers a bit more context about yourself and your dad.
My dad was indeed born in Riga, but it was only because that was kind of like the Hamptons of Lithuania. And his family was raised in the Kovno area of Lithuania. When my dad was 9 years old, the war started and things started getting really bad very quickly thereafter. He was in the Kovno ghetto and afterwards in a Schanzerlager, and eventually he was in Dachau. He was 15 and a half years old when he was liberated by American soldiers, and at the age of 16 he arrived to Mexico with nothing but the clothes on his back with his father. And he only had a 3rd grade education. He didn't speak Spanish or English, but he built himself up from scratch and eventually built a successful business. And his business was on the border between Mexico and the United States. So eventually all of our family moved to the United States. And it's not lost on me that when he was 15 and a half, he was liberated from a concentration camp by American soldiers. When I was 15 and a half and turned 16, I emigrated to America, but with all the opportunities.
These stories are all special, and they never cease to inspire. How did your father meaningfully transmit his life lessons to you? Was it in words? Was it in deeds? Was it age appropriate? Did he talk about the Holocaust in the home?
Well, Lawrence, the first thing to share is that I was, as a kid, surrounded by a number of other Holocaust survivors that my dad was friends with, including his partner in business and other people that I respected and cared for a lot. And one thing that I noticed is that the vast majority of Holocaust survivors fit into one of two categories. They either had to shut it off and not talk about it in order to move on with their lives, or they would talk about it, but they were consumed with sadness and difficulty and darkness because of it. And my dad had this rare ability to do neither of them. He didn't shut it off, but he had very positive vision of life. I appreciated so much how incredibly strong he was, that he was able to, when he talked about it, he did cry and he got very emotional, and it was very difficult for him to talk about it and for us to hear it. But then he lived his life with so much light, and the company is called Kind for a reason, because he inspired me and my siblings and my mom by always being the man that was trying to make people's lives a little bit better. If the flight attendant or the waiter or waitress was having a difficult day and was a little grumpy, my dad would start launching joke after joke after joke. He would break them down and make them laugh. And he was kind to the bank president as much as the bank teller. And he just lived his life almost as his mission was to try to put a smile in people's faces. And it was very interesting. In terms of your question about whether it was age appropriate or not, I was 9 years old when my dad started telling me very harrowing stories where he pulled no punches, and he told me in graphic detail about what he experienced. And my mom, I remember, once told him, Roman, why are you talking to Daniel about this? He's only 9 years old. And my dad looked at her and he said, he's 9 years old and he needs to hear it. When I was 9 years old, I needed to live through it. It definitely marked me, and it definitely impacted me and forged me into who I am. And more and more as I look into my past and into myself, and I think about my formative influences, without any doubt, being the son of a Holocaust survivor is a very defining aspect of who I am and of my identity and of how I think and how I act. And you mentioned earlier that a lot of the ventures I've done, every venture I've done, tries to build bridges. And that's very much connected to my promise to try to prevent what happened to my dad from happening again to other people, and do what I can to try to build common ground among people in order to prevent those atrocities. Even my life outlook, I tend to be very worried about everything. I think it's very much marked by my determination to protect my children and to make this a better world and live it a little bit better than the way I found it.
Let me ask you, Daniel, you talked about your dad's ability and almost mission to bring happiness or joy or kindness, if you will, to everyone he met, whether it was a bank president or a flight attendant. How do you think he was able to actually appreciate kindness after what he experienced, as opposed to focusing on the depravity and lack of humanity that he experienced? What gave him the ability to see the other side of it?
Well, first of all, I think he saw his life as a new lease on life. Like every day after surviving the Holocaust was kind of like just to be lived and to be, appreciated. So he didn't take it for granted, and he just was grateful to have that extra day, and he just made the best of it. He made sure to remind me and tell us, when he told us about all the suffering that he went through, he also remembered the kindness of others. There were 2 or 3 episodes, many in his life, but 2 or 3 that are harrowing that he shared about how the kindness of others in the toughest and darkest of moments enabled him and his family to survive. So he contrasted it. But the deeper question that you posed, I do not have an answer to it. Like the question of why did he choose to remember those moments of kindness rather than just be consumed by the moments of darkness? I do not know if it was nature or nurture or something he read or just how he was born, his life attitude. It's because you couldn't you wouldn't have blamed him if he chose to or was unable to overcome all of the trauma. Nobody could blame such a person, and yet he was able to overcome it and not forget it, and make sure that his children, and he went to speak to high schools when we moved to the United States, I remember, and when we were in Mexico, he used to talk about it, and it consumed him. It was hard for him, but he just did it because he knew that people should never forget, so that we don't make those mistakes again, those tragedies not allowed to happen again. But how was he able to just see it through a prism of the spirit of kindness rising above the shadows of darkness? It's a very good question that I don't have an answer to.
Daniel, you mentioned before that your dad started to share with you some of the more harrowing stories when you were only 9 years old. Do you have siblings, and are they older, are they younger? And did they have similar... Did your father's Holocaust story affect them similarly? Did they take away the same lessons, or did they have a different experience based on their age or when your dad began to share information?
We're 4 kids. I have an older sister named Liliana, then me, 1 year younger, then Tammy, about a year and 2 months younger, and then Sioma, named after my grandfather, who's 4 years younger than me. And we're all very, very close. We love each other very much, and we all have a very similar perspective on this specific issue. We have a lot of differences on other fronts, but we all feel and connect to his story with, I think, a lot of shared sense of purpose. And, my mom and my dad taught us to be ambassadors, to do our best to be ambassadors to our people and recognize that we will be fairly or unfairly, because, you shouldn't be stereotyped, but we will be ambassadors to the Jewish people. And so we try very, very hard to build bridges. Every one of us, we have that common trait where we will give popcorn to the person in the movie theater, and we will extend that hand and treat, people with respect and dignity. With I think there's a very common purpose on that in all of my siblings and I. I do not know Lawrence, and I've never asked my brother Sioma, who's 4 years younger than I, when he remembers starting to talk about this issue, because I have 4 children myself, and I find it hard to compartmentalize, right? To let me right now talk to this one about this, but not to, it tends to become a family conversation. So I don't know if Sioma, my brother, remembers starting to hear it when he was 5 or also when he was 9, or how well my dad found a way to give us what we needed to hear at the right moment. But all of us came out with a conviction to fight so what happened to my dad won't happen again.
It sounds as though your father did an extraordinary job in terms of transmitting it in a healthy way. I just recently read an article by a psychiatrist who does a lot of research in this area of second and third generation. Her name is Arit Felsen, and she talked about this need of many second generation from survivors to connect with people, that they know that their parent and somehow survived because someone saw a spark of humanity, and this need to connect with people that is, and you're describing a very similar kind of need even on your own part. If we transition a bit to...
Can I talk to that for a second, Lawrence?
Of course.
As I told you that I do my own self-analysis and try to understand myself, I do think that there is a little bit of an existentialist fear and need. And, I hope that my children will always want to connect with human beings because of the beauty of that human connection. And kindness is a magical force where, the person doing the kind act gets as much out of it as the person receiving the kind act. It's this magical force where you just make happiness happen more by just treating each other with dignity and kindness. But I think in my case, it is a little bit more connected to that fear. My father had some horrible episodes where my grandfather's kindness helped spare them from death. And I really feel like I hate having enemies. I feel very uncomfortable with it. I will fight where I need to fight, and I will defend my family's honor and my people wherever I need to do so, and stand up where I need to. But as a general rule, I really lean towards building bridges. I think that's a much smarter strategy in life. And as much as I do have the positive aspect of just enjoying it and being kind for the sake of being kind, I do think that there's something truly existential borrowed in me about the fear of, burning bridges that tomorrow can catch up with you.
Yeah, it's a compulsion almost, but it's a compulsion that drives you to something very positive.
Yeah, but I have a friend that is never worried about who's going to like him or not like him. And he's a wonderful person. He's one of my best friends. And he and I have these conversations. And it's interesting to me that he doesn't have that need to be liked or that need to build those bridges. And he's a very kind person and a very respectful person, but he doesn't have that neediness. It's something I ponder a lot about how do I want to raise my children, because I definitely want them to be dignified and treat people with humanity and respect, but I want to do them just because it's the right thing to do, not because that have the neediness that I have.
Did you talk with your children about the Holocaust at the same ages that you heard about it, or did you approach it differently?
Well, I'm in the middle of it, right? Because I have a 7-year-old daughter, 9-year-old twins, and an 11-year-old boy.
Right. So you're experiencing it right now.
Yeah. So I'm at I don't remember perfectly what my dad communicated precisely when. I remember that moment when I was 9-year-old because it was really engraved in me. But I remember a lot of the horrible stories that my dad told me. But he didn't tell them to me once. He told them to me presumably hundreds of times. And so I remember the horrible stories that he shared about being in the barracks and being hungry, that they would eat cockroaches if they would find them because they had no food. I remember a lot of these really, really graphic, horrible moments about his feet when they were marching him in the March of the Dead and without shoes going up on the mountains, how his feet were bleeding. I remember a lot of this horrible stuff. I don't think I've shared that much graphic stuff with my kids yet. I did have at Park Avenue Synagogue, they invited me to talk to my son's cohort, and it was maybe 30, 40 kids. And I played a DVD from my father, which by the way is now available on YouTube. You can search under my YouTube channel, and there's I think like a 2-hour interview with my father, which...
Great, so people can actually learn the story.
Yeah, and nothing you and I do today will get close enough to that interview with my father. So I encourage everybody that hears this conversation with us to find that YouTube interview with Roman Lubetzky. But there I started sharing a little bit more candid graphic information because he's now 11 years old. And the teachers were like, whoa, slow down, maybe not so hard. But, you need to find a way to make sure that it sticks while not traumatizing your kids.
Daniel, if we could pivot it just a drop, because you've built a tremendously successful company and business. Can you speak a bit more about how the lessons you learned from your father and the Holocaust translated into the kind of business leader you are and the kind of company you've built?
The way my dad treated others is the way I aspire to try to build the foundations of every venture that I do, which is in a long-term orientation, relationship-oriented rather than transaction-oriented, with humanity, with integrity, with authenticity, recognizing again that I'm an ambassador to my people. And so my actions matter not just to me, but to my people, whether you like it or not. It's just a reality. And if I do something wrong, not only will I be judged, but some people will judge my people. And so I have to remember that and try to handle myself with dignity and integrity always. We just moved, but I had an office in New York where in the back of the office, there was a quote from Rabbi Hillel, which says, "In a place where there is no humanity, strive thou to be human."
But makom she'en ish, right? Tishtadel liot ish, I think is...
Yeah.
It's great.
It's from Pirkei Avot also, I guess. And that quote for me defines what my dad taught me about how to behave. It's kind of like the definition of a mensch is do the right thing even when people are not watching. And again, all of us as human beings are going to face junctures where we have tough decisions. And all of us as human beings are going to be, at some point when COVID goes away, on a checkout counter in the airline when 3 of our flights have been canceled and our patience is being tested. But all of us need to strive to give light, particularly when moments are tough, particularly things are really, really bad. All of us have the responsibility to try to search into ourselves, to our better selves, and not be weak by it. I will talk a little bit about this issue, Lawrence, because with our company being kind, a lot of people say, I just had an interview on Bloomberg a couple of days ago when they asked, well, Daniel, don't you think that at some point kindness is just being a pushover and you need to take a stance? And a lot of people confuse being kind with being nice. And so a lot of people think that being kind is softness and mushiness and weakness. Nothing could be furthest from the truth. You can be nice and just be polite, but to be kind, you need to be honest. You need to say things. You can be nice and not cause problems, but to be kind, you need to solve those problems. You need to reach out to help, to fix those things. You can be nice and not bully people, but to be kind, you need to stand up. You need to stand up to the bully. You need to do what's right. You need to have the conviction and the action and the purpose to do what you need to do. And so kindness takes enormous amounts of strength. And you can think about it in your daily life when you're walking through the streets and you see a person that's having a difficult time. How hard is it for you to reach out to them because you don't want to invade people's space? But if you're going to be a human being, sometimes you need to try to help that person in that moment where it might be uncomfortable. Let alone when you need to stand up to that bully and you're a little bit intimidated. Let alone where there's that German soldier that while people were not watching threw a potato by my dad's feet. And, he risked being punished. I don't know what could have happened if people had seen it, but it would have not been good for other of his superiors to know that he's taking some of his provisions and throwing them at my dad. And my dad remembered that moment. He told us about it so much because I think as I analyze this, I think it was not just the sustenance of the potato. And, the potato was rotten. It's not like it was a filet mignon. But first of all, when he was scrounging for cockroaches, that potato meant a lot of nourishment. But I think it goes beyond that. I think the fact that by that time, he was probably one of those subhuman looking people, emaciated, and the fact that the German soldier looked at his eyes and recognized his humanity and took that risk and that pity upon him, I think it just helped my dad keep going. So kindness, particularly during those dark moments, takes enormous amounts of strength.
Daniel, I read somewhere that when your father was liberated, he was, if I have this right, 6 feet tall and weighed 70 pounds. So for people listening to understand what it means to have a potato, it was life. And I think it goes back to something we talked about before, about the fact that your father made a choice to remember that story and to remember that kindness in a sea of evil and transmit that onto his children. Is quite spectacular. Sometimes our greatest strengths in life are also our weaknesses, and I'm curious whether there are any aspects of being the child of a survivor, emotionally or otherwise. We touched on it a bit about the need to connect, that has been a challenge for you, or was a negative impact for you of being the child of a survivor.
It's interesting. I've never, ever in my life thought negatively or putting pity on myself or a negative outcome of being the son of a Holocaust survivor. Nothing, ever. I feel so proud. of course, I feel horrible about what my father went through, and even more about the 6 million people that did not survive. And that's one of the most horrible and harrowing episodes of history. But me, as the son of a Holocaust survivor, all I feel in being the son of my father is enormous amount of pride, enormous amount of determination, enormous amount of affirmation for I have a purpose in life. I have enormous amounts of conviction. Yes, I have a little bit of a neurological disorder with the fear and the existential concerns, as I shared earlier. But like you said, Lawrence, I channel it in a very positive way to try to make this a better world. And I feel like my generation, your generation, we've been so lucky, my father went through such a horrible situation, and people before him, it was such a dark period in history. And then since then, things started getting better, and democracy started advancing, and freedom started advancing, and rule of law and respect and progress. And the last 70 years, for the most part, with some notable exceptions and some historic challenges for the nation of Israel and for America and others, but for the most part, it's been decades of progress. And I feel like my generation has a responsibility to leave the world better than we found it. And I don't think that our generation has done that. I think that our children are going to be the first that inherit the world that's worse than the way their parents found it. Like, my parents made this a better world, and we now have so many challenges. There's a rise of authoritarianism across our world. There's a rise of intolerance. There's a rise of hatred. There's food droughts. There's climate change. There's plastic in the oceans. We have to do our part to try to invest in the future so that our children don't inherit a worse world than the way their parents found it.
So, Daniel, I feel on many levels, also as a child myself of a survivor, I feel like I could talk to you for hours, but I want to be respectful of your time. So I'm going to ask one more question before we turn to the next segment of our program. My understanding is that one of your missions has been to build bridges, as you worded it. And an example of that is when you established Peaceworks, trying to bring Arabs and Israelis together in business to foster peaceful relationships. And as you described, in today's intensely divisive climate, do you have any insights into how we can do a better job of building those bridges, not necessarily in the Middle East, but more to attack the issues that you described? What can we be doing better?
Well, like you said, Lawrence, we could talk about that issue for hours, but I'm actually going to, before I go there, because you earlier asked me a question about my father's example to me in building kind and also in building Peaceworks. And I do want to share with you a little bit about him that I don't think I've shared, and connect that. And then I'll come back to your question, which
Wonderful.
Is a very important question. My father arrived to Mexico with a third grade education, not speaking Spanish or English. And he worked 2 or 3 shifts in factories around the clock till he was able to build his own small business. And eventually, he was one of the most educated people that I ever met. And he spoke 9 languages. He was self-didactic, self-taught. He read 5,000 books, read entire encyclopedias, cover to cover, volume A, volume B, volume C. And that's how he educated himself. And he was a great, thoughtful businessman. And so I did observe him, and I don't know where he got that knack for business. But he was a person that treated people with respect and forged long-term relationships, like I alluded to earlier. But I don't know where I got that entrepreneurial spirit. And from an early age, when I was 8 years old, I was doing magic shows. And when I was 16, I was selling watches in shopping malls and kiosks. And then I started Peaceworks and I started Kind. And there is, I think, a part of it that goes back to being the son of a Holocaust survivor and having that existentialist sense that I needed to make my way. I needed to be able to sustain myself. And I'm not kidding you when I say this is both funny and depressing. I think that part of the reason I learned magic and I learned so many languages myself is that I felt like, God forbid, besides being a lawyer, that could be useless in a war. And I wanted to have skill sets so that I could find a way to navigate through the apocalyptic periods. And I really think that there's a lot of what I taught myself, honoring my dad's memory, was to try to have enough ability to survive a tough moment and to be able to entertain and charm people into survival. And it's, it's sad that we feel the need to do that, but I do think it's very connected to me being the son of a Holocaust survivor. Going back to your other question, I think if I speak about it broadly, there is a very serious challenge in all of society, like you said, not just in the context of the Arab-Israeli conflict, but even the divisions that are existing here in the United States. And even within my family, we have a difficult time talking about these issues. All of us follow my father's example, but I personally think Trump is a person that just does not in any way represent the values that my father taught us. And he's a bully and he's the divisive figure and not kind. And one of my sisters actually supports him. And we have a great difficulty trying to bridge that chasm, and even within our family. And it's not easy because there's an issue about listening, but there's also an issue about values and about being true to your values. But it's all the more important, particularly during these times, that all of us do our best to try to listen to others and try to understand where they're coming from and try to be critical thinkers and critical listeners. And our society right now is facing increased atomization of information, where Facebook is going to feed you what you want to hear, and you're going to go to the cable television channels that affirm your beliefs. And all of us tend to have an easier time listening to information that affirms rather than informs our beliefs. But we have a duty to try to listen to the other side, to try as hard as we can to understand where they're coming from, and to try as hard as we can to accept that there's a lot more nuance than politicians enable us to see. There's a lot more that we need to do to understand that gray in between the black and white, and to try to find a way to forge common ground. And the only way to do it is through empathy, empathetic listening, to being better listeners, which is very hard during these times, and to trying to be critical thinkers and critical listeners. We have the circumstances in our country, in the United States today, for forces of demagoguery and populism and nativism, whether from the far left or from the far right, to try to destroy our democracy. And we need to protect democracy and rule of law and freedom now more than ever. It's really, really, really important that all of us not allow politicians to divide us, all of us not allow politicians to fool us, and all of us reach out to bring forward those people that have been left behind. Because otherwise you look at history, and these are the moments when things can turn really, really quickly and get really, 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 really bad. If so many people are being left behind and we don't bring them along, things can get very, very ugly. So it's both about taking policies to help those that need the help, and about trying to not allow parties and politics to divide us. I hate parties and politics. I hate parties because they make you think that your person's right and the other person's wrong no matter what. And the way for us to really, really transcend that is to recognize that these parties are figments of people's imaginations. I just read the biography of Albert Einstein by Walter Isaacson. And Einstein I was very happy to hear that a smarter person than me was similarly very suspicious of party loyalties, because they make you tribal, and then you defend your person no matter what, even if there's evidence that you shouldn't. And it's really important for all of us to unite around the values that we care about in America, in the world, to defend the values of integrity, of respect, of freedom, of democracy, and work together to protect those.
It's also one of the reasons why we've launched this program, because we do believe that the lessons of the Holocaust resonate and should resonate today more than ever, in the sense of the importance of the dignity of life and the respect for others, the risks of totalitarianism or the risks of a breakdown of the rule of law and democracy. And so a lot of the values you're referring to, we think are can be learned and transmitted through the experience of the Holocaust. And you're just a fabulous spokesperson for that, and it's deeply appreciated. With your permission, I'd like to switch gears to a segment that we call the lightning round. And the idea here is really not necessarily at all, it's not about the Holocaust, but really just for our viewers to have an opportunity to know you better in a more lighthearted way, maybe a little bit irreverent, so I apologize if my questions are uncomfortable.
Did you see the movie, I think it was called Life is Beautiful with Roberto Benigni?
I did.
So when I saw that movie, I found myself laughing a lot and enjoying the movie a lot, even while crying a lot also. And the movie has a lot of a sense of humor, but it's around the topic of World War II and the Holocaust. And I felt really guilty laughing around this topic. And I called my dad and I told him, Dad, it had never crossed my mind to ask this question to you, but did people laugh when you were in those barracks in Dachau? Was there ever a moment of laughter, or was it just darkness? And he said, Danny, it was incredibly important. I just cried because I said Danny and I heard my dad's how he said it. But my dad said, it was incredibly important for us to keep a sense of humor. My dad, my grandfather, my dad is saying, your grandfather used to tell jokes all the time, and that's what kept us going. Like, he had a sense of humor, and he kept all the Jewish inmates, with a little bit more of a spirit by using humor and jokes to keep us going. And he even tried to crack jokes to the German soldiers to try to humanize ourselves and make them. And it was really interesting for me to think about. And just like, the Hillel quote that you and I like about in a place where there is darkness, strive thou to be human, or a place where there's no humanity, strive thou to be human, and a place where there is darkness, bring the light. In that darkness, you need to bring that sense of humor. So bring it on.
Yeah, I will just say, Daniel, at Yad Vashem, certainly at the American Society for Yad Vashem, we always have this discussion about what is appropriate programming, right? Is it okay to have a social event for our young leadership, or a dinner, or what have you? And we've concluded that part of our mission is to bring people together
and to give life and live life and laugh, and that's the best denial of Hitler's efforts for us to thrive and enjoy ourselves.
And to be part of, whether it be our organization or others, it's to be able to reaffirm that we're here and that we are celebrating life. And that is very much part of our message. So you said I could bring it on. We'll start off easy. Again, if there's any question you're uncomfortable with, just say pass. But the idea is fast responses. Somehow I feel like you're up to the challenge. I don't know you well, but I feel like you're up to the challenge. All right, here we go. If you could have dinner with anyone, living or dead, who would it be?
My dad, no question. I miss him a lot. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. You could editorialize, but fast.
No question. If I could see anybody and have dinner with anybody, it would be my dad. I would do anything for that.
That's beautiful. Kind is a great brand. Name 3 other brands that you admire.
Starbucks, Apple, Amazon.
So is it true that Snickers satisfies?
Yes.
Kind
satisfies more.
Kind has a slogan, ingredients that you can see and pronounce. What if I can't speak English?
We have them in Spanish also. We're now in 32 countries.
32 countries, and with 32 different labels?
Well, some countries are might share a label, but yes, we have with many different labels.
So tell us the truth. Is it cruel to be kind?
It's beautiful to be kind.
Are you actually being kind to people with nut allergies?
Yes, very much so. My son had nut allergies. We have products that are nut free, and we do crazy allergen cleans to make sure that people can enjoy the products. For example, if they are allergic to cashews but not almonds, we do very thorough allergen cleans so that people can either eat tree nuts when they need to or eat the other products. One of the foremost allergists, Karen Ado at Stanford, is one of the best people at helping people cure them from allergies. She says Kind bars are her go-to snack to recommend to patients that she needs to desensitize. Because one of the problems with allergies is that when we avoid the food product, then we become more allergic and then you can have an anaphylactic attack. So what you need to do is with the supervision of a doctor, you need to try to overcome those allergies, and there's a whole methodology to do it, and they use Kind bars with that.
Where did you go for your favorite vacation?
In my life?
Let's say your favorite family vacation.
Oh my God, Lawrence, I have so many wonderful vacations. We went to Israel with my children and it was unforgettable and it was really beautiful. And we went from the north all the way to the south and we hope to do it again.
You went to law school. What was your favorite course?
My favorite course was constitutional law with Gerald Gunther because he regaled us with all his stories and they had nothing to do with law, but he was just, and he was a great scholar, but his stories were a lot of fun. Okay. Back there are that book, Constitutional Law from Gunther, and I was taking notes along the way. I wasn't a nerd till I got to law school, or maybe like my last year of college when I wrote my thesis on the influence of economics in resolving the Arab-Israeli conflict. But in law school, as I was doing the Gunther book, I would notice there were a lot of little mistakes. So I would put Post-its and eventually at the end of the year...
Did you email him or you didn't email then? Did you send it to him?
I set a meeting with him and I gave him an hour's worth of notes. And he was stunned and he gave me an acknowledgement in his book in the 11th edition.
Oh, that's fabulous. I think I'm a nerd too. I think I have the same book in my shelf. Okay, say the name of one of your first Peaceworks products five times fast.
Moshe Pupik and Ali Mushmumkin's world-famous sun-dried tomato sprate. Moshe Pupik and Ali Mushmumkin's world-famous sun-dried tomato sprate. Moshe Pupik and Ali Mushmumkin's world-famous sun-dried tomato sprate. Moshe Pupik and Ali Mushmumkin's world-famous sun-dried tomato sprate. I could keep going, but that's a little different from kind. You know, when we came up with this idea for Peaceworks was Moshe Pupik was the grand chef and Ali Mishmumkin was the great magician, and together they concocted this sun-dried tomato spread or sprate whose aroma was so powerful that it put rival armies in a friendly trance and they dropped their weapons and replaced them with spoons to partake of the sprate.
You're making me hungry. If you were to make Aliyah and you couldn't live in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, where would you live?
I love the north. I love, I would try to find a place near Haifa in the outskirts. I think it's called, where is this place? Tivat Rimon, I think.
On the water or more in the mountains?
I'd have to look, Lawrence. The coast between Tel Aviv and Netanya is also beautiful. So either somewhere there or further up in the north.
So you were on Shark Tank. What was the worst business idea you've ever been pitched?
The worst business idea, one that I invested in. I'm just joking. I can't. There's a hilarious idea that I actually agreed to invest in, but it sounds really silly, but it's cool. But we just filmed and it's going to air, so I'm not allowed to talk about that one.
All right, well, now we're going to have to watch it. I have two more. Rumor has it that you can say, hello, how are you, in 40 different languages.
I can say thank you. I can say thank you in 40 different languages, maybe more. And I can say hello, how are you, maybe in 20, I don't know. I can say basic sentences in many languages. Again, this is connected to being the son of a Holocaust survivor. It's 100%. Fun, but when you speak to a Bangladeshi guy in the taxi and you say, Donobat Bondu, Kemonache, I can say funny proverbs to them in their language. First of all, it makes their day, but it also builds a bond and a relationship and disarms them. And it's partly because I loved building those bonds, or it's partly an existentialist thing for me to have that toolkit in case of emergencies.
But Daniel, what language can't you do it in, and why?
The way I learn the languages is whenever I travel to a place, I do have this nerdy part of me. On the airplane, you do not want to be sitting next to me and be from that country, because I will spend my 1 or 2 or 3 or 6 hour ride up learning words, and I will be asking you, tell me the weirdest proverb in your language, and then I'll write it down and repeat it. And then by the time I land, I can say 10, 20 words, and then I try to remember them. So if I haven't been to the country, maybe that's why I wouldn't be able to, or I haven't met a person. Even if I don't go to a country, if I meet a person from a different place, the first thing I do is, how do you say thank you in X language? And then I try to remember it.
Spectacular. So you mentioned before that you like to perform magic. I've been told, a little birdie told me that you called yourself the Great Whodani. Is that right?
Well, my uncle, the funny story is that my uncle said, when I was setting up my business as a magician between the ages of 8 and 12, my uncle Jordan said, you know what? There was a great magician named Whodini. You're Danny, because in Mexico they call me Danny. Say Whodani. But the funny part is that my partner was Jaime, and he said, well, what am I going to be? And he said, I'll just be Jaime. And Jaime doesn't ring at all, but it was so silly that till today people call him Jaime.
Jaime and Whodani. What's your best magic trick? You don't have to tell us how you do it, but what's your best trick?
One my dad taught me, I can change the time on a watch by just holding it like this.
So cool. Well, thank you, Daniel. This was great. So much fun. Like I said, I would pay money to be in the seat next to you on one of those long flights.
Trust me, you would not.
just to talk, and it's just so wonderful. And you are an inspiration for our audience about how to take the lessons from the Shoah, from the Holocaust, the respect and honor that you show your father, not just by how you talk about him, but how you honor him in your actions and in your mission. And it was really just a privilege to spend this time with you, and it's deeply appreciated.
Thank you, Lawrence, and thank you to everybody in the Yad Vashem community for your work. That's so important to keep the memory alive and to do so with righteousness, with pride, and with conviction.
Thank you for spending this time with me and getting to know Daniel Lubetzky and hearing about the profound impact that his father, Roman, a Holocaust survivor, had on his personal and professional life. As the son of a Holocaust survivor myself, I know just how deeply our parents' lives helped shape our own, and the meaningful lessons that we learned firsthand from the bravest people we know. The lessons taught by people like Roman Lubetzky are those of resilience, the ability to respond to the evils of the Shoah through healing, the ability to recover by building trust and planning for the future, and the ability to thrive by inspiring others and building for future generations. Please join the American Society for Yad Vashem at one of our upcoming virtual galas on October 8th, November 5th, or December 2nd to celebrate 6 noteworthy individuals who embody the spirit of resilience. Your support of the important work of Yad Vashem has never been more important. I invite you to go to yadvashemusa.org to find out more. We hope to see you there.